Hey guys, I'm not dead. I'm still here. I'm trying to stay relevant. So I thought I'd upload a little episode of the podcast today. And this interview is going to be quite cool. We have a crystal healer coming on here. It's going to be nice. I don't know too much about crystal healing myself. Usually I see a lot of negative things about it, but we're going to learn what it's about. So thank you for watching, and I'll ring him up now. Hello.
Hello.
Hey, what's going on? How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for coming on. Uh,
Yeah, no, thanks for having me.
So, can you just give us a little breakdown? Like, what is crystal healing?
All right. Well, basically, it is the belief that um, semi-precious or precious minerals that have been in nature for a very long time have certain energies or vibrations that can affect the human subconscious and that can reconnect you with your own self or with nature.
So, what are the things that it heals? Like, what are the benefits of this?
Well, a lot of people use it for motivation, for like self-inspiration, or to help themselves with issues they've been dealing with for a long time. Usually things that are part of your own psyche or subconscious. A lot of people also associate it with the practice of manifesting, which is just the idea that your own thoughts and your own um, inhibitions, you could say, are able to affect your own future and your fate.
Interesting. So, are there any like cons to this? Are there any kind of side effects, particularly negative ones, or is this just a pure positive experience?
Generally, the belief is that it has to do mostly with your intention and what energy you're putting into it. However, there have been some certain stones, such as moldavite, that are associated with like negative feelings or vibrations, and are generally stayed away from by people in the community.
That's interesting. Um, so that actually leads right into the next question. What are types of minerals like? Because you mentioned one mineral is negative effects. What decides whether a mineral is positive or negative in terms of effects?
Well, generally, like in very ancient cultures, stones such as, let's say, sardonyx, have been associated with certain things, and that same exact idea of what a stone does has been kept throughout most of history. And I think part of the reason for that is that we associate those certain colors and textures and whatever, anything that physically describes a stone with certain emotions and feelings. And if you can project those things and your own intentions onto that, then it will have a similar effect to what you expect. So the idea of manifestation, right,
Hmm.
is that you're getting out whatever you put in. And whatever vibe or like thought a particular item puts into your head is generally the kind of thing that you're going to manifest coming out of it, right?
Hmm. That's actually interesting. Um, how did you get into crystal healing personally?
Myself, I originally, when I was 13 years old, I started collecting rocks and minerals and stones and everything, pretty much just because I liked the way they looked. I thought they were pretty and everything. I love rocks. But what really got me into like researching the practice and everything was probably just like from some of my friends and from influences online where I learned about this stuff. And it really intrigued me. And the more I looked into it, I guess I just decided that it was something that really interested me and that resonated with me. And I think it has had some genuine benefits before.
Hmm. So, it this is probably going to sound stupid, but is this legit? Because it's described online and by the scientific community, it's described as a pseudoscience. And is it legit? Just in all.
Well, I think describing it as pseudoscience, I have no problem with that because it's most certainly true. And any evidence of this kind of stuff actually working is going to be anecdotal because that's the only way it's used, right?
Hmm.
Nobody's doing studies on this kind of thing. But I think just the fact that it's been used for so long and that so many different cultures and ideologies have all seen the same connection with these same things really does lead me to believe that this is a legitimate thing, a real practice that can actually affect your life.
That's interesting. While I was doing research for this, and I even saw it here, there was rock consumption. You know, people licking rocks, people sucking on rocks. Are there any benefits to sucking rocks mentally, physically?
Absolutely not. That is just something that honestly for the sake of a joke, really.
All right.
Um, I find it interesting that that made it into the interview.
I had to add that. That was just something
Yeah,
I couldn't ignore.
don't eat rocks, kids. They're not usually very good for you.
um, you probably know that there are, like a lot of scams centered around crystal rock healing. Are there any tips to avoid the fake scams from the real ones?
Well, generally, like information on this kind of thing is going to be fairly consistent, but it's not too hard to spot when people are making things up or like giving you fake information. If you're not too familiar with anything and you're still confused on what things are true and aren't true, I'd say it's best to stay next to people who are like in very like maybe smaller communities or that aren't being sponsored or making any money off of these things because then they really don't have any incentive to like lie to you or anything. And another thing is ethical sourcing. And a lot of these minerals and rocks are mined in very, very like unethical ways through workers that do not consent to their practice. And you want to make sure that you're getting these things from places that are ethically sourced. And generally, people who have that intent in mind won't be the type to scam you on those sort of things. But I'd say the biggest thing is just trying to do your best to avoid misinformation because it's pretty dangerous.
Speaking of misinformation, are there any books or YouTube channels you would recommend for people, trying to get into crystal healing?
Personally, I think it should be something that has to do more with your own sense of self and your own ideas than what other people influence you to believe. Because there are certain things that I feel like can definitely be traced back to a point, and you can tell that they aren't the most authentic sources of information. So I think with the idea of manifesting in crystals and whatever, what matters most is that you're paying attention to your own thoughts and your own personal convictions of what these things mean.
Hmm. What's your opinion on religions that kind of worship? Well, not worship's the wrong word, but they pray with rocks and they like devotedly believe in crystal healing. What's your
I
opinion
think
on that?
that's a perfectly acceptable thing, and as someone who personally believes that they have effects and focusing your subconscious mind, if you're trying to connect yourself with your own personal beliefs, I think it's a perfectly valid way to do so.
Hmm. Do you think the rocks, their effects, and just the overall vibe you get, do you think it differs from region to region, culture to culture?
I think in probably that could be the case in just that I think a general perception or like the feeling that a group of people get and that they associate with certain things does have power and can affect the way that something works for you, I think. So, depending on where you're from, how you've been raised, and the associations you make with these different things, that can definitely have some change, I believe.
Hmm. This one was actually eating at me as I was going to sleep last night. What separates a mineral from a different mineral or something like that? Like what stops me from praying to a rock I found by I don't know on the floor or something? What separates minerals in terms of healing and stuff?
Well, that depends a lot on your own personal belief and how you believe these things work. Um, I mean, most common, like non precious rocks that you find in the ground, like flint or just like sedimentary stones, are never really treated with much reverence or importance. And you don't really think of them. You associate with them with ground and dirt and things that don't matter to you. But I think the fact that we lift these precious minerals and that we associate them with such important things to our lives gives them a sort of like spiritual significance. And that can be part of what projecting your manifestations onto them is more effective than just some rock you found on the ground.
Hmm. Does metallic luster have an effect on the healing of the rocks or the vibe you get from them?
Metallic luster. Can you refresh me on what that means exactly?
It's when a rock has, kind of like metallic shine to it, or there's little bits of metal in the rock. Um,
Well, I mean, I think, as I've been trying to point out, I think it has a lot to do with the way that you associate these things and the personal feelings you have that are directed towards these, like stones or idols or whatever. And so things that have like that shine or stick out to us in our brain that we recognize, I think that can have some sort of effect, but just the mere fact that something is like a shiny rock or it's just like a dull looking rock doesn't have too much of an impact. It's just about your own personal way of thinking about it.
hmm. So crystal healing isn't really about the rocks; it's about the mind. Is that what you're saying?
In my opinion, yes, I think all spirituality is about the mind because our subconscious has way more power than we give it credit for. And it's mostly projection onto these things that we have built a subconscious like stigma around that they have value and worth and power. And because of that, I think you can use them to your own gain.
So, and I'm gonna try and put this into words because this is just kind of like a weird idea. If I didn't want it, let's say I found rocks boring and stuff, would it still be called, crystal healing if I decided to like metal beams or copper ore or anything else that's possible, and any
I
object?
think that's totally fair. Yeah. I think part of like if you believe that humans like our subconscious is connected in some sort of like superliminal way, I suppose,
Hmm.
that can be a like driving force for why people believe that these things actually have effect on our lives because it's not just the power of your own mind, it's the power of the minds of the people around you and in your community. And if it's of your personal belief that like the subconscious ideas around these things affect you, then maybe that's why certain things work for certain people and why like even though copper or gold is just as valuable as any of these things, people may have more like subconscious bias towards the pretty shiny things with like gorgeous colors or whatever.
Hmm. Do you think crystal healing should be taken more seriously? Do you think there should be more focus on it in terms of science and just generalization? Should more people be focusing on crystal healing?
I think in general, if the like most communities had more focus on like the spiritual aspect of life, I think like mental health and productivity and stuff and just peace of mind would be a lot better. But from a scientific perspective, I don't think that stuff like this needs too much focus because it's not a scientific practice in any sense. So while I think that personal focus on it would benefit some people, it's definitely a thing that should be kept personal because that's what makes it important.
So when you say you should keep this stuff personal, so there shouldn't be, or like, is there anything wrong with people having, groups of people that like crystal healing and, just stuff like that? Is there anything wrong with forming groups like that?
No, of course not. In fact, I manage one myself, and I have plenty of friends on there that I talk to frequently about this kind of stuff. But the thing that worries me more is that there's a lot of people that don't fully understand this and try to push negative stigmas onto other people, especially those that don't believe in spirituality as a whole. And I think that's a very harmful practice,
Can you
not
give
only
us?
just to people. Oh, sorry about that. Yeah.
Sorry, continue.
Okay, yeah. So I think that can be harmful, not only just to the people that the stigmas are being pushed on, because it forces them even further into this idealism that, this stuff is invalid and doesn't make any sense or isn't actually valuable. It makes us look like lunatics. And it can also be harmful to the people that are trying to force others into this belief because it makes them feel like those other people rejecting them and disregarding them is pushing negative energy into their own lives. And none of those things are good.
Definitely, definitely. You mentioned spirits. Sorry, spirit energy. Is that what you said?
No, I was talking about spirituality, which is just,
Spirituality.
yeah.
I can't pronounce some words. I'm sorry. Could you just give us a little rundown on what that is?
I think spirituality is just any kind of non-scientific belief that promotes the power of like your own mind or soul, and that you as a person have innate worth and value and power, and you can use that to influence yourself and other people if you do so the right way. That's a very broad description, but I think some of the examples of that, like, having your own personal religious beliefs, or,
I'm not.
um,
I'm not trying to sound like a jerk or anything. I'm trying to be respectful with this. That
of course.
sounds very parallel to pseudoscience. Now I understand they're completely different things, but it's just the way you described it made it sound a lot like pseudoscience.
So the definition of pseudoscience, depending on what people think of it, is definitely something that varies. But in general, I think describing crystal healing or any other spiritual practice as pseudoscience doesn't really have a problem with me, because I get the feeling that whatever you believe has more influence on yourself than what other people believe, and that if you believe in this thing, even separate from science, and that, you don't pay mind to the fact that it's not scientific, it can still have an effect on yourself. And I suppose at this point I am rambling a little bit, but what I'm trying to say here is I think pseudoscience has a very negative connotation, and people use it because they're trying to disregard others' beliefs. And that's not the way it should be said, because there's nothing wrong with believing in pseudoscience.
Well,
And there's nothing wrong with influencing your own life with things that aren't necessarily proven or factual.
I have sorry, I just had a just lapse or whatever. I have a problem with pseudoscience when it's capitalizing, when it's making money off of beliefs that aren't scientifically.
That is fair, yeah. And I can understand why, like, connecting with that previous question you had about how people can get scammed off of these things. I think that's part of why I believe it should remain something that's very personal and connected with your own self and the people around you, and less with corporations or people that are going to exploit those that believe in this stuff.
I mean, take companies, for example, take Gwyneth Paltrow's Goop. It's notorious for being complete pseudoscience, They had that incident with therapy bee stings. I forgot what it was, but this isn't really a Goop rant. This is about crystal healing.
Right.
So, just to wrap everything up now, because we're just passing the 18-minute mark, thank you so much for coming on. Do you have anything to say as a closing statement or advice, a quote, anything?
I think just if I want somebody to focus on anything from this, it's just that you should pay a lot of mind to what resonates with you personally. Because even if you don't believe in any of this, or even if you are taking like a lot of influence from other people, what I'm saying here is that the energy and the, I guess, intention that you have going forward is what's going to guide this practice as a whole. And I think that if someone else is trying to force you into this stuff, it's not something that you should pay any mind to, and you should move forward with whatever you believe in.
Mm. All right, thank you so much for coming on.
Of course. Thanks so much for having me, man.
You're welcome. Thank you. See you.
See ya.
Not too bad. I have to say that was an extremely well interview conducted on my part. I hope you guys learned something. Let's keep the comments respectful as always. And that's going to be it.